I've had this board set up to go for a while. It's been days. Now the things seem to be settling down. So for new subscribers, welcome. And I've been going through team by team and picking my favorite players over their existence. This doesn't mean best, even though, yes, some of the best will often show up in the top 10 favorites. So top 10 Avalanche, top 10 Nordiques. Colors almost match, right? It's close. So there you go. So top 10 Nords, top 10 Avs, and we'll see who we come up with. Now, honorable mentions for Colorado. There are a number. Sandis Ozolinsh, Marek Svatos, Wojtek Wolski, and Valeri Kamensky. Kamensky, honestly, I wanted to have him in the top 10, but then I looked at the top 10 and I'm like, where do I put him in the top 10? He'd have to be 11. So number 11 would unofficially be Valeri Kamensky, who I think was an underrated talent in his time in the NHL. So number 10 on this side of the board, on Quebec's side, goaltender, Dan Bouchard. Always liked Dan Bouchard. Liked him in the Flames organization and then in Quebec's as well. Good goaltender. Again, it's the 80s, so there'll be a lot of debate about, well, he's a good goaltender for the 80s. But still, good goaltender. Liked him a lot. And there are a number of Quebec goaltenders on this board. There's 3 of them, actually, and only 1 for the Avs. I think it's because I felt bad for Quebec goaltenders as the years went along, as much as anything else. All right, so number 10 on the Avs side of the board. And number 10, I will put John Michael Liles. You know, one criteria that I use with this, and I know it may sound silly, is, so when I would play the old NHL games, which players did I pick up and did really, really well? John Michael Liles was one of those guys. But again, when he played with the Avs, he was pretty good. I know he had some iffy seasons towards the end there, but still, very good defenseman, I thought. Good two-way defenseman, more offense than defense, parts of his career. I liked him with Colorado. And again, this was a time where I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Colorado, and yet I was still like, you know what, I like that Liles guy. Number 9. And you know what, for Quebec, honorable mention to Marian Stastny. Anton Stastny at number 9. So everybody remembers Peter Stastny and what a big, huge star he was and how great he was. And rightfully so. Anton Stastny gets shadowed by his brother because Peter was fantastic. But Anton was pretty good too. He had some pretty solid point-producing seasons. And then I don't know, depending on who you ask, Marion came over, it just seemed to change things for the Stastny brothers. But I liked Marion as well. And yeah, Anton, pretty solid player. Not very well remembered, I would think, in hockey circles because he happened to be Peter Stastny's brother. And it was during the 80s where a lot of people were scoring points. So that's Stastny at 9 for the Quebec Nordiques. Number 9 for Colorado. Yeah, I'll put him at 9. This is where Avs fans are like, what? Seriously? How do you have Adam Foote at 9? Because I have Adam Foote at 9. Physical defenseman, big defenseman. Colorado Avalanche legend. Solid defenseman throughout his career. And, I have him at 9. Good defensive defenseman. You talk about guys who may have been eligible for the Rod Langway Award at points in his career. Best defensive defenseman in the NHL. Foote would have definitely been in that conversation. And is a good example of how, certain players, you're never going to get a Norris if you're Adam Foote, but could definitely have won something if they had another award for that. Number 8 on the Nordiques side of things. Now, if you're below the age of 35, you can say who? Alain Cote. Alain Cote, good, solid, two-way forward, who wasn't spectacular, played a long time in Colorado, and I liked him. I did. I thought he was a good player, and I thought he was useful, and again, because he played in Quebec, I maybe that's why he doesn't get as much attention there in his time in his career than he might have gotten in another location, like, say, for the Rangers or Toronto, but Either way, I like Dalin Cote. It's my favorites list. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. I do apologize because I'm Canadian. It's what we do. Number 8 on the Colorado side of things. If you hear a motor running, it's a neighbor with their power washing. Apparently, they're going to power wash the entire yard, house, car, driveway, everything. So, all right. Just pressure wash the whole darn thing. I haven't seen them do the trees yet, but imagine that's coming too. All right, number 8 on the Colorado side. That's what people like. Sum up with your audio in this video. No, there isn't. Number 8. Yeah, I'll put him here. It's funny, you know, I've never been like a huge fan of the Avs because I was a huge fan of the Nordiques, and I didn't like that they moved to Colorado. Not that I didn't want Colorado to have a team, but I was a big Nordiques fan. Mikko Rantanen, though, gets into the number 8 spot. I'll throw him there. I think Rantanen is a guy that, or Mikko Rantanen, sorry. He is underrated. He's an underrated player, and you know that's something that's going to happen. Much like Anton Stastny here, what happens with Rantanen is he's playing with Landeskog. He is playing with Mackinnon. So by playing on a line with those guys a lot of the time, he's going to get overshadowed. His contribution will get overshadowed. He's an excellent player in his own right. Number 7 on the Quebec side of things. Randy Molar. Tough defenseman. A lot of penalty menace with him. Solid defenseman on a Quebec team that didn't always have the best of the defense. But I liked Molar. And yeah, that's as far as I can go on that one. Just to say, yeah, I like him. That's why he's in the top 10. On the Colorado side of things, at 7, I will go with, and this is as an Avalanche team member. Yeah, I'll put him here. For his overall career, one of my favorite players, but I'll throw Adam Deadmarsh at number 7 on the Avs list. Did a video on Adam Deadmarsh not long ago and how his career wasn't long enough. And it wasn't. And Deadmarsh, absolutely solid player, big goal scorer, where you get the goals at the right time. So when I say that, it doesn't mean he's like a 40, 50 goal guy. Just when you need a big goal, Deadmarsh was often the guy who would provide it for you. And you know, inspirational player kind of guy. Number 6 on the Quebec side of things. This is where I say, you know what, Dale Hunter. I know what he did in Washington. I know about the Pierre Turgeon thing. He didn't do that in Quebec. Certainly, though, not popular with Montreal Canadiens fans. Dale Hunter comes from a family of... The Hunter brothers were not... none of them were going to win the Lady Byng Award. We'll put it that way. So none of them were really Lady Byng candidates. Dale and Tim being the most obvious when it comes to the ones that you don't want to necessarily meet in a dark alley somewhere. But Dale Hunter also scored a lot of points. And the 1,000 points, the 3,000 penalty minutes, that is a mark. Nobody will ever hit it again. There will never be another player that does what Dale Hunter did. And I respected him. I understand why people don't like him. I understand why people get mad at him about incidents that took place. It's not just the one with Turgeon either. But for me, he was one of my favorite players. Number 6 on the Colorado side of things. Yeah, I'll put him at 6. So part of that big line in Colorado right now, Gabriel Landeskog. Landeskog's a beast. And he is so much better than I think a lot of non-Avalanche fans know that he is. It transcends the points. It's more important than points. So that if Landeskog has a season of 50 points, it doesn't necessarily mean he was less effective in a season where he might have 70. He does so many things that don't involve putting points on the board that he is equally useful either way. It's great when you get the points. It's a bonus that he's good offensively. slash great offensively, depending on that streak and depending on where he is that season. But everything else in his game is solid. And so Landeskog, was one of those guys where since the channel picked up steam and I've been able to watch more games, Landeskog's one of those guys, man. Just fantastic. Number 5 on the Quebec side of the board. Let's see. Yeah, I'll put him at 5. No, I can't mess this name up. I'm going to mess this name up, aren't I? Yep. Yeah, I did. Yeah, it didn't take long, did it? I feel like just putting in dots. You guys know who I'm going to put up here. Curtis Lecision. Curtis Lecision doesn't just have a name that doesn't sound like what it looks like. Very good defensive defenseman. And again, I respect defensive defensemen. Playing as much floor hockey, street hockey as I did, and my parents not having the money to put me into regular hockey, that was kind of my spot, was defensive defenseman. I could definitely shoot. I definitely, had all of that, but I really liked the idea of shutting down the other guy. I like the idea of at the start of a game going, okay, well, he's not getting a goal today. It's not his day. And Lecision had that going for him on Quebec teams where the defense wasn't necessarily great. And so I have great respect for defensive defensemen in the NHL. This is why I have an affinity for defensive defensemen, because I watch them play and I'm like, that's something. Because I would come out of, and this is just, street hockey and floor hockey. This is not ice hockey where it's way more dangerous. I would come out where I'd be bleeding, I'd have bruises because of all the shots I'd blocked and because, I'd basically taken my life in my own hands, trying to make sure those guys don't score, and they were often bigger than me too. So, I have great respect for guys like Lecision. On the Colorado side, 5th, and of course this is where people say, like Adam Foote. Exactly. Number 5, although Adam Foote was a pretty big dude. Number 5 on the Colorado side of things, I'm going to go with, let's see, 3, 4. All right, so 5 on this list, I'm going to go with, go with 5 on here. So the games played leader for just the Colorado Avalanche. And so I'm not saying like the combined games played. Milan Hajduk. Milan Hajduk, the interesting thing for me with Hajduk was when he came over, he was older. And I think to myself, if Hajduk had played his whole career in the National Hockey League, could we have a conversation about Hajduk not necessarily being a Hall of Famer, but at least being discussed in that realm? And again, we discussed players that are overshadowed. Hajduk was overshadowed. Played with some great players. Definitely an overshadowed player. Number 4 on the Quebec side. Clint Malarchuk, of course, is famous for the tragic injury that took place where the skate blade goes across his throat. One of the scariest incidents in hockey history. And tragic in that Malarchuk was a pretty darn good goaltender too. I was a big fan of Malarchuk's in Quebec. I was really excited to see what his career was going to do, and then it was never the same after that incident, and for obvious reasons. And Malarchuk is one of those reasons why when I see goaltenders going, I don't need a neck guard, I think, you know what, you might want to think about having a neck guard. Whether it's that kind of like turtleneck looking neck guard that they have, or the one that hangs down from the mask. Malarchuk is, that cautionary tale. And it's too bad because it definitely shortened a career there. I guess I could do a shortened career video on Clint Malarchuk. That would make some sense. And throw him in the THG Hall of Fame while I'm at it, because he's the kind of guy that you throw in the THG Hall of Fame. Definitely one of my favorite goaltenders. Number 4 on the Colorado side of things. Peter Forsberg. Forsberg was a pretty good prize that they got for trading out Eric Lindros. Absolutely one of the most talented players to ever skate. And then when he was on one foot, he was still able to go out and skate. Absolutely insane. Peter Forsberg towards the end of his career and the amount of pain that he was going through and the amount of adjustments he was trying to make in order to keep his career going. Inspirational story. Kind of crazy he kept going as long as he did, trying to make sure that he could keep it going. But yeah, nothing but respect for Peter Forsberg. Number 3 on the Quebec side of things. The other goaltender on the board. You guys knew Ron Tugnutt was coming. There he is, number 3. I won't put him at 1. But Ron Tugnutt, and everybody looks back on that 70 save performance against the Boston Bruins. But what gets lost is the fact that this was not unusual for Tugnutt to face a lot of really prime scoring opportunities, and it was a horrible defense in front of him for the most part. It was a team that was just absolutely awful, and Tugnutt did the best he could with what he had in front of him. And he showed later on in his career, when he played on good teams, he could put up excellent numbers. And he is a classic example of a goaltender that if he had played with better organizations, who knows what his numbers might have looked like. So yeah, Tugnutt gets in at number 3 there. At number 3 on this side, yeah, I'll put him at 3. Patrick Roy. Now, I've mentioned this in the Montreal video, and I'll mention it here as well. I couldn't stand Patrick Roy when he played. But I have to say, that cocky attitude was fun. And whether he was winking at players, whether he was saying, I can't hear you over the rings in my ears, which means you're wearing your rings wrong. If your rings are plugging your hearing, you're probably wearing your Stanley Cup rings wrong. But you know what? Patrick Roy was fantastic, and I had a begrudging respect for him that now, yeah, I'm a fan. I do wish he had played for a team I cheered for. He didn't, but Patrick Roy definitely belongs at number 3 on the list for Colorado, because to me, that trade is what made Colorado the Stanley Cup champions in '96. Not to say they couldn't have won one with Jocelyn Thibault as the starter, just it made it a lot easier with Patrick Roy in net. And of course, easier is a relative term, so I'm not trying to diminish what they did. Number 2 on the Quebec side of things is Michele Goulet, which means number 1 on the Quebec side of things is Peter Stastny. Michele Goulet scored a ton of goals in the 80s, of course. Michele Goulet, absolutely fantastic player for the Quebec Nordiques, who then went on and played pretty well in Chicago as well. And of course, Stastny was the face of the franchise. So 2-1 on the Colorado side. I know this is sacrilegious, but I'm going to have Joe Sakic at number 2 and Nathan Mackinnon at number 1. And here's why. Mackinnon proved everybody wrong. When Mackinnon signed that contract that we all look at now and say, what a deal. What a deal this is. This is a great deal. What an absolute deal. This is such a bargain. Didn't say that at the time it was signed. And fans in general, we're writing off Nathan Mackinnon as recently as, 3 years ago? And he has gone out and proven us wrong. The only thing missing for him now is a Stanley Cup ring. And I do believe he will get it. I do believe at some point the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup because I believe in Nathan Mackinnon. So Joe Sakic, Burnaby Joe, one of my favorite players, absolutely. I would have Nathan Mackinnon ahead of him, and I would have Stastny at the top of the Quebec list. And part of what helps with the Stastny brothers as well is their story of defection was harrowing. And so a lot of courage in being able to defect as they did. And so that's my top 10 for both teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Can't wait to see why I'm wrong about my favorites. This is favorites, not the all-time greatest. Favorites. Yes, Nathan Mackinnon and Peter Stastny, both pretty good players. Greatest. Thanks for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.